This is Linda Grible, and has a presentation um, on the Hornings and commemorating them on Veterans Day. So we'll proceed with the next slide. Let's see. I think I hit enter. There we go.
Okay, so is it okay to get started or?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not
Okay,
going to
that
do anything except flip the charts for you.
okay. No, that's fine. You did a nice job, Chuck. I appreciate this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this first. My youngest, I have two daughters, Kate and Jacqueline. My youngest is Jacqueline, and has shown a little bit of interest in just like studying the world wars. I think she was in Normandy a couple years ago. She had taken a trip on her own through Europe, and she had stopped at Normandy, which was really interesting. And so, as a gift for her that Christmas, because this was a couple years ago, excuse me, I decided to put together a book on all of our relatives on Andy's side as well as my side that had actually had served in the military, and that kind of got born out of all this. So anyway, so this is starting with my dad. His name is Edward Joseph Horning. His name was just the reverse of his dad. His dad was Joseph Edward. He went by Joe. My dad was Edward Joseph. He went by Ed. And as you can see from this picture, U.S. Army Tech 5. He always said he was in Korea. He never mentioned World War II. And it wasn't until after he had passed away that basically I think somebody had put something together with him on Find a Grave. I hadn't known it at the time, and they said no, his military service was during the I guess we call it like the Cold War, I guess, basically after World War II, but technically before Korea, because I don't think Korea actually started till 50 ballpark. So long story short, he did not see military service. He had some problems with the one eye, and he did not qualify for military service, but he had always had an interest in being in the service. And his high school yearbook, everybody listed three things about themselves, and one of his was basically he wanted to go into the Army, which he did. So I was glad he was able to. But if we have time, I've kind of put together a couple of paragraphs on my dad with his military service. Do we have enough time to read that, or
Yes,
is
yes, you
that
do.
okay? Okay, I
By the
didn't.
way, did you get the links? I sent you some links to U.S. veterans grave sites. Did you see that? Well,
Uh,
you go ahead and
okay.
give your presentation, and we'll summarize it and change the charts
Yeah,
after the
no,
fact.
yeah,
But
that's fine. I just thought, if it's getting too long, I can abbreviate it.
no,
That's why I
no,
wanted to
no,
ask you first.
no, you're the only thing on the agenda.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background with my dad. My dad's, most of them are pretty short. My dad's was just like two, three paragraphs, so his was just a little bit longer. Um, Hold on a second. So anyway, my dad was born in 1926, Randolph, Ohio, December 21st. So when he went into the military, he was just, I don't know if I have his actual date here. It's 19, no, he actually, okay, he went in the day after Christmas, so he had just turned 20. So anyway, his registration card selective service notes the following information. His address is Box 3 in Randolph, because, Randolph, small country town. At the time of his registration, he was 18. He had been a student at Randolph High School, and they asked to notify in case of emergency his one uncle that he was close to. His dad died when he was really young. And so basically, he had a paternal uncle, which was his dad's, it was like the third brother in the family, and his name was Oscar, and he was somewhat close to him. My dad was noted as 5'8", 150. I don't think that's correct. I always thought he was a little bit taller than that. So I remembered him closer to 5'10", but that's what they had listed. Blue eyes, brown hair, and a dark complexion. His complexion it wasn't light, but I don't know that it was dark either. His hair was more kind of very dark, of course. Physical characteristics will aid in identification. For him was left blank. He didn't have any other than some vision issues that I had mentioned. The card was completed December 26, 1944, the day after Christmas. And oh, this was in 1944. I'm sorry, 5 days after his 18th birthday. This was not 46, so I messed up with that. Okay, he served in the U.S. military as a member of the U.S. Army, the 24th Corps, 52nd Battalion, and belonged to the 201st Signal Corps. From the Kent, Ohio Selective Service Board, he left for his pre-induction physical in Cleveland. His military training began on the 9th of April, 1946, and he received his basic training at the base in Fort Knox, Kentucky, before he headed out by passenger train to California, where he was temporarily placed at Camp Stoneman in Oakland, across the bay from San Francisco in California. And when I asked him about Camp Stoneman, because I had asked him many years ago, I wanted him to give me some information with his military service, and he had mentioned that Camp Stoneman was a sort of collecting point, was how he termed it, where servicemen would wait for orders and wait to ship out like a deportation camp. From San Francisco, he took the General Black, and he had a picture of that a long time ago. I don't know whatever happened to it. I wish I could find a picture of the ship that he shipped out on. I have not been able to do that, so that's something that I keep looking for. But he said the ship was eventually returned due to engine trouble, and he said specifically the boiler blew up, but fortunately everybody was okay. He said there were brief stops made in Hawaii and Yokohama, which is in Japan. During wartime, he remembered a type of boat that was referred to as a Liberty boat. These boats were made to fill quickly the never-ending demand of vessels needed. In Japan, he was able to get off the boat for 3 to 4 hours and visit the mainland, because that's one place I've always really wanted to go. I've had a short layover there. I've never been out of the airport. So I was always kind of fascinated that it's like, oh, he was able to visit Japan, even for a short time. I thought that was pretty neat. And he said he went into one store and he said it reminded him somewhat of a local, like an O'Neill's, which is now Macy's. And I just have a little more information on him. I don't have a lot, but I have some. He served his country by performing overseas duty in Korea. And in my note here, because again, there was always some confusion as to, basically it wasn't like active military duty in World War II, but it was before the start of the Korean War. So technically it is, for all intents and purposes, always billed, if you will, as World War II. So he was actually in basically more or less during peacetime, between the end of World War II in 1945 and the beginning of the Korean conflict in 50. So he was right there in the middle. Basically, he worked his way up from private to corporal T5, and he was only in the service for like 9 months. He was in for a real short amount of time. Like I'd said, his dad had passed away when he was really young, and his mom, there was kind of, I'm not sure of the specifics, but there was what my dad had always referred to as a hardship case. So he was in the military for 9-10 months, but then but he did end up coming home. He didn't serve for a long, but anyway, just a little aside from that. So he worked his way up from private to corporal T5, and his term technical Tech 5 was how he was identified. Ed and the other Army men were docked at Incheon, now known as Incheon, and originally they had it Inchon, and since that time, the Korean, the anglicized version, if you will, is Incheon. And that spelling was changed some years ago. He was stationed at what he believes is Ascom City. I have not looked that up on a South Korean map, so that's something I'll have to do. His duties included that of a warehouse man, where he would give out old equipment like in a stockroom. Because he always said he always termed it as cleanup, was how he termed it. He was given training for handling on a MKM rifle. And then he received a Victory Medal as well as an Army of Occupation Medal, Japan. And an interesting aside on that, I have never seen those medals, and I haven't even actually seen his papers, but he had a wallet size copy. I don't have that with me. I'll have to, it's in a album. I'd have to find it. But it was almost kind of like a copy of his papers, but it was shrunken so it could be put into a wallet. I have not seen those two medals, but, and I'm never going to be able to get in touch with, get hold of the originals, but I have looked online, and if you can prove like a connection to the individual in question, if you will, you can get replacements. So that's something that I want to do, is to be able to replace these two medals at some point. He served in the Army for 10 months before receiving an honorable discharge and returning to the U.S. He was given a certificate attending to such at the Separation Center in Fort Sheridan, Illinois, on the 24th of January, 1947, and was recommended for further military training. And that's pretty much what I have on my dad. So I do have a copy of his, I have a copy of the General Black, a picture that I found on Wikipedia. It's not specifically when he went, but it was, just kind of like a general picture, as well as a copy of his registration card. And then, like I said, his honorable, the discharge, and I do have that shrunken into a wallet size. So that's, yeah, that's pretty much what I have on my dad. The only other thing that I have, and then I don't know, well, I'll send you a copy of this later, a copy of the card. The one other thing that I do have is that my dad didn't really have a lot, but he had saved a small newspaper article, and the newspaper article was from Portage County, and I can't read this because it's pretty. It's pretty dark copy, but it says 39 men leave Kent today for pre-induction physical test, and this included men from Randolph, Ravenna, maybe Kent. I don't know. There was like 2 or 3 different cities, and so basically, in like a little small local newspaper, he was given a little recognition for basically going into the service. So that's pretty much what I have on my dad. So that's his background. That's his military service for the time he served. And I
Okay,
was
well,
glad he
I
was
will
able to.
summarize what you just said and embellish the PowerPoint.
Okay,
I sent you a link. He is listed in the Veterans Memorial. He's buried in Western Reserve National Cemetery, and they tell you exactly where
right.
where to go. Section wall 11, row A, site 46. There's a nice little map here. Anyway, I sent you the link. I'll put the link on the chart too. And
Okay.
so that'll be nice information for you to have.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Andy actually, the other day we were looking for some information for his dad. And actually, it was something related to him teaching, but we ended up finding some military service in addition to that. And he had some time ago, he had put up um, like for World War II veterans, you can get recognition, if you will, online. And he had posted, I never knew he did that. He had something posted really nice for his dad. So that's something that I'm going to look into for my dad as well. So,
Yeah, well, you might as well just use this site here. It's a place where you leave your tribute and biography, life and mementos, historical documents, that sort of thing. It's an
right.
official veteran site, so you might want to look at that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. And my
Okay,
apologies if I,
so I mean, I sent it to you on Messenger, so you have it.
okay. Yeah, my
Okay, but
apologies if I
as
went
far as
through
this
that a little
PowerPoint,
quickly.
as far as this PowerPoint presentation, I'll summarize what you just had to say,
That's
and then
fine.
I'll embellish the left side. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next person, right? You ready?
Sure. I'm not, yeah, I didn't know if, who, I know how I had it on Facebook, but I'm not sure if your order is the same. So, well, okay. Well, it's the same. So that's Andy's dad. So Andy is Andrew M. Andy's dad is Andrew B. But that's a little interesting too, because when he was born, I think he was just born as, or named Andy Gribble, and it's sometime his birth certificate does not say Andrew, it says Andy. And then at some point I think it was when he was confirmed, he chose the baptismal name of Bartholomew, and he really liked that. And even though it wasn't a technical, he never had like actually an official name change, if you will. It just kind of stuck. So he was born Andy, but basically years later he adopted Andrew B. Gribble. But anyway, that's his picture. Andy looks, I think, a lot like his dad when he was younger, although I can see his mom in him too. He was a U.S. Air Force sergeant. He was in the service quite a bit longer than my dad. My dad was in less than, I want to say maybe around 9, maybe 10 months. I think Andy's dad was in closer to 4 years. I don't, his Andy's dad was very analytical, and he was always really good with organization and taking notes and stuff. And I think it was after he had passed away. His parents didn't have a lot of belongings, but we were really fortunate. We got a lot of the historical items. He has 4 sisters that a lot of them they just didn't want him, so we took them. But we found from his dad's possession was just like one of these little memo pads. It was like, not even probably maybe 3 inches by 5 inches, very small. And in that memo pad, he literally had all the stops, that he had made during his time in the military. He was actually, I'm trying to think, during the course of his time, I think he was on 5 different continents. So he started out in North America, he was in Northern Africa, he was in Europe, he was in Asia, India specifically, and then I think it was close to the end of his time, he actually shipped out of Australia, which is
Wow.
real interesting. Yeah, Andy said his dad really didn't like to talk a lot about his service. I guess that they had done some, I think like maybe, I hate to use the word camping, but, basically they resided in tents, basically as part of the military training. And I think it was just because of that, he's like, yeah, he never wanted to go camping. I think there was just kind of an association with that. He didn't want any part of that, which I guess is pretty understandable. But I do have a little something written up on him. And this one, and I'll try to kind of abbreviate this because this one's a little bit longer, but I don't want to take up too much time on any one individual because I have a lot to cover. When his dad was born in 1920, and he always said he was in the Air Force, but if you kind of look at the specific dates, like if you look at Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and even Coast Guards when they came in, there's when he joined the United States Air Force as we know it today, like name-wise, it didn't exist yet. So when oh, hold on a second. So the USAAC, which is United States Army Air Corps, was renamed from the earlier United States Army Air Services on July 2nd, 1926. So and he was born in 1920, so this was quite a few years earlier, and was part of the larger United States Army. So when he enlisted on January 30th, 1941, and then it was another 6 months later. Technically, when he went in, he really would have been part of the Army, but that changed 6 months later. And then at that point, he was part of the USAAF, the United States Army and Air Force. Okay, so anyway, he initially signed up for an initial 1 year enlistment. He was 20 years old. He entered military life as a private, and he rose to the rank of sergeant during his time in the service, which is obviously commendable. His discharge date was August 10th, 1945. And just as with my dad, they were both obviously honorable discharges. His enlistment records recorded him as having 4 years of high school, as well as a civil occupation of actors and actresses, which that's something that we've never really understood. So that's something that's always kind of been something we need to look into. Showing his height is 5'10", a height of 152, so he's tall but pretty slim. Let's see what else here. He is a later selective service card from September 6, 1945, which was dated after his original discharge date, shows him at age 24. And I think my understanding was he was already, I don't know if he was out at that time, and then this was just a second one that came up. I'm not, yeah, that one I'm not real clear on. Anyway, and then they give his description: black hair, brown eyes, ruddy complexion. He had a scar on his left eyebrow. I don't know where that came from. No employer was noted at the time. Okay, and then this is kind of interesting too, because when he went into the service, my understanding was he wanted to fly. He wanted to be a pilot, and his mom was he was the oldest of two. He had a younger sister. He was the oldest child and the only son, and he really wanted to fly. The mom was really concerned because obviously she was concerned just about security, safety, flying during the war and all that. So he did not end up becoming a pilot. He was a mechanic. So then that's pretty much how that came to be. So he served as an airline mechanic despite his wishes to be a U.S. fighter pilot. He was a mechanic on W2 warcraft. He traveled throughout Northern Africa as well as into India, keeping pictures of some of his movements throughout the war, and was awarded the following medals. That's on his discharge paper, and unfortunately I don't have that listed there. In his own words and handwriting, the following is his timeline of his war, and I'm going to kind of just go through this really quickly here. Again, he was on 5 continents: North America, where he started from here, Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia, as well as 7 countries outside the U.S., French Morocco, which at that time was French, Algeria, Tunisia, Italy, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and India, eventually shipping out from Australia. That was towards the end of his service. And at least 3 states: Ohio, Virginia, and California. And I have a note on here. I wasn't sure how Andy was transported back to California to Ohio after discharge, so whether that was by train or plane. My guess is probably by train, but I don't really know. But one of the things that we had that was real interesting was, like I said, because of his notes, he kept really good notes, and I have a copy of that here. So in July 31st, July of 1942, he left California, and then the same day he arrived at the think it's called the Murrow Air Base in California. He was there from the end of July to beginning of October. And then he went to Langley Field, which I have on here is, I guess this is Virginia. So this is all over several months. And he boarded a boat October 15th, 1942, which would be 15 years to the day before Andy was born. And then about 3 weeks later, he arrived in French Morocco in India. And it looks like he was only here. It seems like it was like a few days. Well, actually, no, he was here through December of that year. He has a couple other things. I think Rabat's in Morocco. I'm not sure. And this was through the end of the year into February. And then at some point, middle of February, he went on to Algeria. And then they have New London Air Base, and I'm not sure, but I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I think of London, England, but I think this is a little different. I'm not exactly sure where this is. And within just a short time after that, within a month after him leaving Morocco, they show him in Algeria. And then there's a couple other places, Nozzle, Bone Tingley. And again, I need to kind of look some of these up to see exactly where they are. I'm assuming this is all Algeria. And from there, he shipped out to Tunisia. Oh, goodness. And then he looks like he was there for a while. And again, this is over several months. Eventually, he left Africa at the end of 1944. In February, or no, this was early 1944. I'm sorry. By the middle of February, he was in Italy, and he boarded a Polish ship, but I don't have a port here. And eventually, he actually was in Egypt as well. And then he boarded a train from Egypt and left camp. Huck, I don't know where that is. Yeah, he was just kind of like all over the place. And then basically India, Bombay, looks like another city in India, judging by the name. Wow, he's like,
World travel.
ah,
What did
well,
he
yeah.
do? What did he
And
do?
we would not have known this. He just left. It was really funny because when we found this, I love putting this stuff together, but I was just like, I don't know. One night I was going through things and I'm like, what is this? And somehow or other, I'd never come across it before. And like I said, it was just like these little, maybe not even a 3x5 sheet of paper, probably smaller than that. He just had all this stuff sketched in pencil. And I'm like, whoa, this is his military services. He went from one port to another over the course of 4 years. He just kept, these phenomenal records, probably thinking, maybe he didn't know if anybody else would ever be looking at him, but we did. And we were really glad to have those. By the end of July, it says he left the harbor of Bombay, and then 2 weeks later, just under 2 weeks later, he docked in Melbourne, Australia. And and I don't know if this just comes from being an only child, because this is the kind of stuff that I get into, and it looks like he did too. But he even has when he crossed the equator on here. He gives it's a specific date, early February, the time, because that's something like now. I think if you're in a boat, I think they'll give you like a certificate. And actually, and there's a name for that, and I can't think of the name offhand, and I'll find it and give it back to you. But he had the certificate. I have a copy of it somewhere. I don't think we have the original, but we have a copy. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, oh, let's see here. I'm almost done. I just have one paragraph left here. At some point, he did have an injury, but it wasn't real specific what it was. I think it was somewhat minor. I'm not sure what it was, but he was, when he returned, he came back in through California. He was in a military hospital for a period of time, but he recovered, and then he was discharged again, honorably discharged. Discharge type is recorded as follows: disposition, discharge, or retired for disability, line of duty, discharge, retirement. No. Okay, and then it says subsequently, Andy's discharge date was August of 1945. And the really interesting thing with that is when he came back, he was married less than 4 months later. But his wife was like Margaret, my mother-in-law. She was like 4 years younger than him. And Andy and I, when we kind of looked at the dates when he had left, I doubt that they knew each other before they left, or if they did was real briefly, because she would have been like 16. She was pretty young. And again, after a lot of people came back from World War II, a lot of people were marrying, starting families, quickly and all that. So my guess, and we don't know this for sure, my guess is that they didn't date that long, and they were married, and they were married just, I mean, literally within days of 50 years. They were married at the end of, Oh, they were married December 1st, 1945, and when he passed away, it was beginning of October 1995. So they were just like 2 months short of their 50th wedding anniversary. So it was just like, he comes back from the military service and, just gets married, has children, goes back to school, worked at or not BF, Goodyear for many, many years as an industrial engineer. And I think like a lot of men at that time, because I was putting together some other things last night, a lot of men entered the military with the GI Bill. So when my dad came back, he didn't go to college, but he did get some technical training as a service repairman, and that's what he did for many years. Andy's dad actually went back. He wanted to be a engineer, and he got a degree in industrial engineer. That's what he did at Goodyear for many years, and even taught some classes at ACNU, part-time adjunct professor for a couple years as well. So he had a pretty good career and, rose up through the military ranks pretty quickly. So that's a very, very, very quick, short synopsis of his time in the military.
Alrighty, we'll go on to the next one.
Okay. I gotta pull out my thing for that. And I think the rest of these are probably my dad and yeah. Okay, so that's my maternal grandpa. Now I will tell you real quick, I had an distant cousin many years ago. Her name is Mary Jane Elward, and I have no idea how I met her, but the woman was a godsend. She really helped me a lot with the Hornings. She told me the Hornings were pacifists. She said Hornings did not fight. And she told me when Hornings originally came over here, that basically, I guess they came over here. I don't know if Napoleon was coming to power. She kind of told me a little bit briefly, but the reason that our common ancestors, if you will, with the Hornung, soon later Horning, when they came over here, it was because they were trying to avoid war. So in my family, I have found basically families that have tried, they want to avoid, and then others that were, and I'm sure for good reason, but others, such as the ones we're seeing here, that basically, they wanted to do what they could to protect their country. So, I'm not making any judgment when I say that. I'm just, noticing the difference here. This was my maternal grandfather, and from what I mean, I'm no historian by any means, but from what I know with World War One, the World War One was 1914 to 1918. U.S. did not get involved until 1917. So my grandfather at the most was in for a year. His military service was in France, and he was a cook. I don't know that he ever was on the field. I'm not familiar with, but I will read you. I just have like a real short synopsis on him. This was my maternal grandfather. He served his country in the U.S. Army during World War One. He was stationed in France. He was a cook, and he was single at the time. My grandparents on my mom's side were both a little bit older when they got married. So when he went in, it would have been 1918. He was born in 1892. So depending on when he went in, he was in his mid-20s at that point, but he didn't get married. I think when they got married, it was around, maybe 1929, 1928, give or take a year. That's probably the best way to put that. His registration shows him as medium build and height with brown hair, gray eyes. Hornings were tall and slim. Peters were small. Peters were they were not as big, so he was a little more slighter. Company C 305 English 80 Division. He shipped out of Pennsylvania. My dad's family is from Ohio by the time my dad was born, but my mom's family is all from Pennsylvania. His overseas service was from May 26, 1918, so he would have been 8/26, not quite 25. His birthday is middle of June. His birthday is actually on Flag Day, but I don't think it was recognized as Flag Day until after he was born. And he was in from May 26th to June 3rd, 1919. So he was in just under 13 months. He was honorably discharged on June 11th, 1919 from Camp Dix, New Jersey. His veterans compensation application included the following information. His service was from September 18th, 1917. He was inducted from Evansburg. My mom's family is all from Cambria County. I have a long history in Cambria County. It's about an hour outside of Pittsburgh. Evansburg is the county seat. June 11th, 1919. At the time of registration, he resided in Nantiglow, just another city in Cambria County. Let's see what else I have here. No wounds or injuries were reported. His World War I engagements in France included, I think it's Somme, Somme. I don't speak French, and then Saint Mikhail, I have this spelled wrong, and the Muse Argonne offensive. Okay, and this is basically when he's getting compensation, like I guess a pension of sorts, if you will. So yeah, obviously this is after his military services. Total compensation was for 20 months at $10 a month for a total of $200. So he only got this for a little over a year and a half. But I did the dollar equivalent in 2022, which was when I typed this up. So this would be an equivalent of worth just under $4,500 in 2022 dollars. He actually, this is really interesting too. So even though he served in World War I, I guess maybe because of the birth date when they were when soldiers were being sent off for World War II, he still had to fill out another selective service card, even though he was 49 years old, which I thought was kind of interesting that at that age you would still have to fill something out. He didn't serve, but he did have to fill that out. His employer at the time was given his national standard. He worked for a machine shop for many years. And then his address in Akron, which is where he resided. And they lived at a number of different places in Akron, Ohio. But 391 Cornell was where he lived until the day he passed. That was his last residence in Akron. And the one interesting little thing that I have about this is I've been collecting coins. I collect a lot of different things, but one of the things he brought back was he brought back a coin from France. And I remember as a kid, I was always fascinated with this coin. It was a small silver coin, maybe about the size of a quarter, or maybe even a little smaller, and it had a hole in it. And I think that was just the design of the coin. And I still have that. So I think that's pretty neat. But I was fortunate because everybody that I'm talking about with my veterans, I mean, some of them they did have some slight injuries, but fortunately nobody died. So, everybody served their time and then, was able to move on. So anyway, so that's my maternal grandfather. He was baptized Aloysius John Peters, but he never went by Aloysius. He always went by Al or Allie. We just always knew him as Al. So just grandpa. So so anyway, that's my dad's mom. Or my mom's dad. I'm sorry, I got that reversed. Okay.
Go on.
Oh. Okay, so this is Stefan. So Stefan, that's Andy's grandpa. And I think I just have something really brief on him. And we have that picture because in his grandpa's possession was this little book, and that picture was posted in it, which was really kind of interesting. And a little bit of an aside with Gribble, because I always thought Gribble looked German, but Andy, he's more, it's like a Slovak, so it's more Eastern Europe. But Andy always thought, and we may have some papers verifying this, that our spelling with one B, which is very unusual, but he thinks it's because when his grandfather came over, that either somebody misunderstood him when he was coming through, or he may have intentionally changed the spelling. I don't know. That's one story that's kind of got around. But anyway, so this is Andy's grandpa. He's World War I Ohio, father of Andrew B. Gribble. He served his country in the U.S. Army during World War I as a private. At the time, he was single and a rubber worker for Firestone Tire and Rubber. In Andy's family, everybody either worked for like Firestone or Goodyear. That's where a lot of the men worked. His enlistment date was given as May 10th, 1918. He was discharged on June 19th, 1919. And then I have his service number as well. A physical description notes he is of medium height with a slender build, brown hair and brown eyes, not bald, no loss of limbs or other disabilities. This was through the precinct in Akron. Andy's dad was born and raised in Akron, and his dad was not born here, but when his military service, at that time he was living in Akron. Let's see, 25 years old at the time of enlistment. He was born on November 5th, 1893, and that's different than what's noted on Ancestry, so that's a date we have to verify. Yeah, this is showing Serbia, which it sounds like it would be Serbia, but they were not Serbs. Yeah, that's not correct. So there's sometimes I do find some misinformation on some of the transcripts and some of the documents. He was in Company A, 54 Infantry, American Expeditionary Forces, July 4th, 1918 to June 10th, 1919. Honorable discharge in June 1919. So just like with my grandpa, he was in just under a year. I think my grandpa was just over a year. He was just under. Okay, and then there was and there was something called an old man's draft registration, and that's literally the name. His name is okay, and this was for World War II. And again, just like with my grandpa, they're older. He was 48 and he still had to fill, for this form out when he's almost 50 for World War II. Obviously, he wasn't drafted at that point. That time Yugoslavia was given as his birthplace, and because those borders have changed so much over the years, what was Yugoslavia then was, some of these are different now. They have his wife on here working at Firestone Rubber Shop, which is correct. Discharge date of June 3rd, 1919 from Brest, France, arriving back in the U.S. on June 10th, 1919 in Hoboken, New Jersey. Ship he journeyed on was called the Mount Vernon. And that's pretty much what I have on Andy's dad, along with I try to, I'm on Fold 3. I don't know if you're familiar with Fold 3 or not, but you can get a lot of military records. So I go through there and try to get some military records on that as well. And he's buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Akron, Ohio. But what I like about this picture is when people are in the military, I really like to get a picture of them in their military outfits. And we don't have a lot of pictures on him. We actually have the original with this one, which is kind of nice. But I'm really glad we have him in his military uniform. I'm not always so lucky with everybody.
Yeah,
But
back
anyway,
then they
so
didn't
that's
have
for
a lot
Andy's
of
dad.
action shots, so
That's
that's
fine.
great that you just
But
have
he just
more
went
of
by
a
Steve.
candid.
He kind of Americanized that a little bit later. So
Next guy. Yep. You want to go on? Linda, do you
So I
want to
don't
go?
know if there's another one or there is another one. I'm not sure who's next. Okay, this is Joseph Freer. This was also on my mom's side. So this was I'm trying to think. Sometimes it kind of skips a generation. So like my grandpa, the grandpa that I showed you, this would be his father-in-law. So this is my great grandfather, and this is Joseph Freer, and I'm gonna see what I have. Oh, yeah, this is kind of long. I think maybe what I'll do with this one, I'll just kind of like summarize it up a little bit. My understanding, sometimes you have these family stories and you don't know if they're actually rooted in fact or not. So you have to be kind of careful as you divulge certain information. But one of the stories that I had heard was that basically he did not want to go in the military, and you're always thinking, is he, was there a reason for that? Sometimes just people, want to evade for different reasons. And again, there's no judgment on that. Obviously, people were concerned about their life and their family, so it's certainly understandable. But come to find out, him and his wife had many children. On my grandpa's side, there was a lot of tragedy with like deaths and deaths with children. I mean, I just seen a lot of this. I think he had a couple sons that died pretty young, but they also had a couple daughters that were disabled, and I think that would kind of lend it to part of the hesitancy to go into the service. But long story short, he did. So he did serve his country, and I have quite a bit on him, but I'm just going to try to go through really just kind of briefly with kind of like um highlights with this. Okay, he entered the Civil War as a private in the Union Army from 1861 to 1862. And again, my mom's side, everyone's out of Pennsylvania. Cambria County, about an hour outside of Pittsburgh, as I mentioned earlier. Company D, 75th Regiment, Pennsylvania Infantry enlistment. Muster date is noted as January 1st, 1964, with an enlistment date several months later in July 6th. This is reporting from Cambria County. Discharge date is shown as July 1865 with a total of 1 year and 4 days of service. His muster out date was September 1st, 1865 in Franklin, Tennessee. And then he was also able to fill out a pension. I don't know if anyone else has done this. I've actually gone through NARA, National Archives, and I've been able to get a lot of pension records. And I'm fortunate that I did this many years ago because the costs have gone up a lot since then. But I tried it and I was able, there's different package you can get. I always try to get the one that has the most in it. And at that time, you could get the packet of it, and it's just basically copies of a lot of the documents, but it's gone up quite a bit in price. But I actually had quite a bit on him. Let me see what else I have.
You know anything about his
He's
decoration?
shown a 5'6" with dark complexion, dark hair, and gray eyes. His occupation was listed as a farmer, which that's that side of the family. That's just a lot of who we were. when he had got his pension, it was showing him as almost totally disabled, but I don't believe that was from anything with the war. Yeah. Yeah, some of this is just other things from when they were after he passed away, his widow basically was able to collect widow benefits, and then they kind of give like the worth of the property and the worth of, things that they owned. And, and most, like I said, most of my people in my family, it's funny because I always thought, my dad, he grew up without a dad, and, and their family, I mean, they really struggled for a long time, but it was really when I started going through the family history that I noticed my mom's family was really even poorer. And I think with my dad, if his dad had lived, his dad was actually pretty successful. He just, in what he did, he just died so young. They probably would have done all right. But then we noticed this commonality with both families that, a lot of people, they just struggled. But with his pension, and I believe this was after he had died, his wife was entitled to $20 a month, and then this rate increased to $30 a month. But again, this was it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you look at it with what the worth was today, it was a little over $1,000. And then basically it was just a short time after she started to get the pension, she filed away a year later. And of course, I don't think the kids get it at that point. It probably just ended with her. Okay, and then I do have one other thing here because he did have a lot of health issues at the end of his life. I guess these did occur within the service. I didn't remember that. Specifically, rheumatism along with a diseased heart and bowels. So he did have some physical ailments. Uh, okay, yeah. And then this is interesting. And it says there is also note within his file that he had failed to report initially when drafted, which was verified within the pension. And that was what I had told you earlier. So that was probably where I had got the story. And I had a cousin, it was actually a first cousin of my mom's, and I think she had kind of verified some of this. But I had put in here, to be fair, it is also known that there was at least one disabled child within the family. And family lore has it that the time away from home could have caused hardship and difficulty for him. So he reported anyway, but he didn't want to go, but you could kind of understand that as there was good reason. And then this is really interesting too. So when I showed you the picture of my maternal grandfather, so he died when I was only 12, but he had a sister that was a little younger. They were very close, but I actually stayed in touch with her, and she passed away in I think like 1987, 1988. So I was, almost 30. And I kept in touch with her, but she had written me a letter about him, and I still have that letter. And she said, my grandpa Joseph Freer, who you see in the picture, was in the Civil War. He was a great carpenter for my mother and dad, because we also have carpenters on a couple of sides of the family, and this is one of them. He made kitchen chairs, clothes closet, day sink, and a corner kitchen cupboard and table. So I thought that I really liked having that. In the same letter, she reminisced, and again, this is the same picture you see here. My great aunt, reminisced about his passing. This would be her grandfather, and further goes on to write, when he died, I remember my mother lifting me up to see him in the casket. I was 4 years old, so obviously that's probably one of her earlier memories. They dressed him in his uniform, and I remember his mustache and brass buttons. He died 1 year after my father because her father had died real young. My father died in November, and I was 3 years old, and so that would have been his son.
Wow.
And he's buried in Cambria County next to his wife. So that's what I have on Joseph Ritter.
I just,
Oh, okay, Job. Yeah, I have a lot on Job. So this is on my dad's side, and I don't know if for time, and I'm going to kind of leave it up to you because I know that I have several left. And, if you want to split this over a couple different Zooms, I'll kind of leave that up to you. Job Smith Ullum, let me see here. This is my great great grandfather. So my dad's mom was Bernetta. This would be her grandfather. And when again, because, I would try to get a lot of records from the National Archives, there's no shortage of information on him. He was a pretty interesting character. He's very small, but he accomplished, his size had nothing to do with what he was able to accomplish. So obviously there's no correlation between the two. But when I got the his pension file from the National Archives. I mean, literally, it was at least an inch thick. They have, and a lot of the stuff is repetitive, but there was a lot of information on him. So, yeah. And I have other pictures. That's the one I have shown here. So this it would be my dad, and then his mom, Bernetta Ullum, and then her dad, which is William Ullum. And so I'm related to you guys through the Horning side. I'm related to him through, this is my dad's mom. I'm related to you through my dad's dad. Okay, anyway, so with Joe, he served in the U.S. Army 1st Regiment Ohio Light Artillery. This was from Southern Ohio because my dad's family was all from Ohio. Well, I think there's another one from West Virginia. 23 years old at the time of his enlistment, with an enlistment of October 12th, 1861, which was obviously the first year of the Civil War. This was in Marietta. He enrolled as a private, as most of them do. His muster date was November 7th from Camp Denison in Ohio. He volunteered, and he volunteered as an volunteers such as himself serving for up to 3 years. His muster company and regiment were Battery H First. It's LA. I think that's the light artillery, and he enlisted for service. His muster out date was October 12th of 1864. So he was in. I mean, the Civil War was 1861 to 1865, and that was even in April 1865. So literally, out of those, when he was in, there was 3.5 years left of the Civil War, and he served for 3 of that. So he was in for almost the duration of it. Physical description: he was 5'7.5", light complexion, hazel eyes, dark hair. Weight was not given. His occupation was, again, as a farmer. Born in 1837, Antioch, Monroe County. I've been to Antioch. We've been to his gravesite. As with previous individuals, persons attesting to his acquaintance are given. An example of this is that there is an affidavit in his National Archives file that says Affian. I guess the individual is well known and is of good repute and worthy of full credit. And you would see papers like this in his archival papers. Later paperwork confirms that Joe, by 1882, had contracted disease of the heart, bowels, and stomach. He was stationed near Falmouth, Virginia. He evidenced on rolls, and he had an injury to both eyes, it said. And actually, when he did get discharged, it was because of his injuries to both eyes, and this was near Fredericksburg, Virginia. It confirmed his marriage, and then his children, and then this was, let's see here. Yeah, they had a lot of kids here. 7 children. Okay, they ended up having 7 kids. A certified copy of the family record that was also included within his the archival papers. Let's see here. The group that he served in, I did a little search for this online. Battery H, 1st Ohio Light Artillery, that's the LA. The battery had a total of 32 men during service. 10 of the enlisted men were killed or mortally wounded. 22 enlisted men died of disease, so they got hit pretty tough. And I know he did have some active on the battlefield, so to speak. I don't have that listed on here. I should. But that would be something, because most of the time when any of my veterans have been in the military, fortunately they haven't seen any like fighting and that kind of thing. But he was in at least one. I know he was in at least one battle, because they talked about a cannon, and I thought he did get like some recognition or maybe a pin for that. And unfortunately, I don't have that on here. I need to add that. In April of 1906, so this would be 40 some years after the war. He received a pension, a compensation of $14 a month. In today's dollars, or a couple years ago, that would have been $460. Paperwork further showed he had disease of eyes, back, stomach, and bowels. So at the very least, some of this had been started from his time served in the military. And then 2 years after his death, his widow, Mary, died. And in pension papers, her compensation was seen as ending. And at the time of her death, she was receiving $30 a month, and that would have been just over $530 in today's dollar. So with him, this again, that's a really brief summary of him, because that's one of the things in my retirement that I'm going to have to work on. I'm really into the lineage societies, and basically you have a connection to somebody because of where they live, military service, whatever. And I have more related to him than to anybody else, and I really have him to to kind of thank for that, if you will. And then I've been able to find other pictures of him. There's a picture of him with his the group that he served with, and yeah, so it looks like it looks like I have more information that I need to put together on Job. But that's just a very, very brief overall summary of Job Smith alum.
So is his name Job, J-O-B?
Oh, excuse me.
Was his name Job, J-O-B?
So I don't know if anyone has any questions with any of these. I know I'm going kind of fast. I hope I'm not talking too fast, but I'm just trying to kind of sum these up with
I did ask questions, but
with the short time we have here. So
okay, we're just gonna go on because you're not hearing the question.
okay, this is Valentine Vogler, and I got to tell you this really quick little story. So I have a good friend, and she does a lot of genealogy too. And she asked me one day, she says, "Linda," she said, "don't you kind of find when you're doing your family history that you actually have some favorites?" And and it sounds kind of quirky, but it's really true. And he is definitely one of my favorites. So this picture, it's maybe a slight grid, not very much, but back then people just didn't smile in pictures, and there's different reasons for that. But I have a few pictures of him, not a lot. I have 4 or 5. This is one of the few. I do not have him in his military garb. I wish I did, but every picture other than this, he's always smiling, and that was almost like unheard of. So where Job Smith,
Oh, yeah.
that was through my dad's side. Valentine is through my dad's mom's. That's through her mom's side. So this was my great grandmother. This was her dad, and he was Valentine Vogler, and he had several children. I think he had 4 daughters. No, four. I think it was 4 sons, 3 daughters, and his one daughter was my great grandma. But anyway, Valentine, he had a son named. Oh, I'm trying to think. I'm losing my train of thought here. But anyway, it was Augustus Vogler. And you could probably just write a book on his one son. So that would be like my great uncle. And that's somebody that I would really would have loved to have met. Anyway, this one is just really short. Valentine Vogler was my great grandfather. He entered the Civil War as a private in the Union Army Company B. All my relatives were in the Union, so they were all from Ohio, Pennsylvania. He shipped out of West Virginia. At the time of enlistment, his place of residence was in Perry, Monroe County, Ohio. So I'm not sure why he was living in Ohio, but entered through West Virginia. So I'm not real clear on that. His enlistment date was November 18th, 1861, and a discharge date of December 20th, 1864. So again, here's someone else that basically, I mean, he was in almost 3 years, so he was in there a long time. This says December 20th. I found something else that said December 27th, so there's a week discrepancy. Discharge date, Wheeling, West Virginia. His regiment or vessel was noted as, I don't know what this is, a Company P. Total length of service was 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. There was one injury noted to the third finger on his left hand. And one of the things that's kind of interesting with him, so I think he's well, other than the other one there was some illness with Job, he did have some injury with a finger, but thankfully you can live with that, okay. But when he died, I was hoping that when I was kind of going through my papers that maybe I would have found he'd have been buried in Ravenna. His daughter was buried up here, and there had been other ones that had been. He was actually buried in Southern Ohio, but one of the things that was really interesting was with his daughter, who was my great grandma. She had 6 kids, of which my grandma was one, but one of her kids, he was called a blue baby, and he had heart issues, which today you can do surgery for it. At that time you couldn't, and he only lived 3 months. It was very sad. But my Valentine Vogler, who's shown here, he's actually buried next to his grandson. And I always thought that was kind of touching. I don't know if that was just by coincidence or, maybe he had asked about that ahead of time. So you kind of take some consolation in this, this child that died when he was really small, that it's kind of not comforting to know that the grandfather rather was buried in close proximity to him. So and I think I have a pension on Valentine. So I know that there's more to add with him, and I just need to add a little bit more with him as well. So
Well, that's wonderful. You have so much, Linda.
okay, this is Nick. This is Andy's uncle. Let me see what I have here. I've got to I only have a little bit of information on him. So Andy's uncle, mom, her name was Margaret, and Margaret was the middle child of three kids. Her older brother was Joe, and then there was Margaret, which was my mother-in-law, Andy's mom, and then Mary. Mary was the youngest, and this is Mary's husband. So this is Andy's uncle through marriage. So this is Nick Simich, U.S. Navy. This is Andy's maternal uncle. He served in the U.S. Navy during World War II because I think everybody on here was Army. Well, Andy's dad entered his Army, but then it became the Air Force, or yeah, that's or Air Corps rather. But the one exception to the Army other than Andy's was Nick here. So his name Nicholas, but went by Nick. Physical description showed him at 5'10", 165 pounds, brown hair, green eyes, and a dark complexion. His registration card shows a date of January 27th, 1943. In Akron. He grew up in Akron. Thus, he registered on his 18th birthday. He was a student at a time, employed at Fred Arbogast Company. It was in Akron. I'm not sure what they did. And then they give his address in Akron, and I have right on here, unfortunately, no further information is known. But we do have a picture of him in his military uniform. So the picture that Chuck has, that's a really nice picture. It is cropped a little bit. So if you look at the picture on Facebook in the album, you'll notice more kind of like almost like a bust shot, if you will. So it has a little bit more of his features in uniform. And I never really had much information on him. I had a little registration card off of fold 3, and that's the only information I was able to get on him. So
Okay, I have something on him at the veterans, what do they call it? Living
and
memorial.
that's all for
I
Nick.
will
And
put
then of course his
I
service
will
was
put
World
the
War
link
II.
down on it for you. You can look at it at your leisure. Okay, let's see what else we got.
Okay, so this is Andy's. So Nick was Andy's uncle through marriage, but this is his uncle through blood. So his mom's oldest brother was Joe. His name was Andrew Joseph, but he went by Joe. And this is a picture of Joe. And Joe lived a long life. He was a U.S. Army private World War II. And like my grandpa, he was also a cook. And he was in the U.S. Airborne. And years later, him and his wife, Mary, they didn't have any children, but they were very active in U.S. Airborne. They would go to events all over the country with that. I'll give you a little bit of background on him. He was a private U.S. Army during World War II. He belonged to 82nd Airborne Division, of which he was very proud. And if you look up, there's a lot of information on the 82nd Airborne. 325th Glider Infantry Regiment, Company A. He was a cook during his time served. His enrollment date was a week before his 21st birthday. He was actually born on Veterans Day, so his enrollment date was November 4th, which would be a week before. Place of enlistment was Akron, Ohio. Both Andy's parents were born, raised, went to school here. And it shows him as 5'9" tall. Enlistment for the duration of the war or other emergency, that was his enlistment terms. They gave his home address in Akron. Physical description again, this shows, well, actually, there's another card and it showed 5'11". The first one said 5'9". I think he probably was a little taller. Black hair, blue eyes. Next of kin is given as John Verona. That was his dad. That was Andy's grandpa. Let's see what else I have here. And I just have a little bit more on him. What else? Yeah, the only other information that I have was basically when I put together this booklet on him, because when I put together a booklet, I was always trying to look for the insignias of the different branches that people were in. So I had Army insignia, Navy, Air Corps, and all that. But then there was also a couple different insignias just with 82nd Airborne, and specifically an Airborne Industry Division of U.S. Army, specializing in parachute assault operations into denied areas with a U.S. Department of Defense requirement, responding to crisis contingencies anywhere in the world within 18 hours. It was founded in 1917, and the location is, and I guess this is still today, I don't know, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And some of their mottos are all the way and death from above. Airborne forces are grounded combat units carried by aircraft and airdropped into battle zones, typically by parachute drop or air assault. So to the best of my knowledge, I don't know that he ever did any parachuting. I just knew that he was a cook during the service, and that was his military time was how that was spent. So that was Andy's uncle. We knew him really well. I think he died when he was 75, I think, or pretty close to that. And so that would have, so like, and you know, Andy and I, we knew each other from the late 70s. So I knew him for almost close to 20 years. We got to know him and his wife for a while. So, and we always just referred to him as Uncle Joe. So he did not, he went by his middle name.
It's nice.
I think, is this the last one, I think?
I think it is.
Because I did not put everybody on here. I have a lot of other veterans, but I think that I think this is the end of the pictures. So this one, this is Richard Henry Sharp. This is my great great grandfather, and this is also on my mom's side, but this is through her maternal side. The other ones I showed were through my paternal side. The interesting thing with him is because, again, with the lineage societies, there is a website called it's DMWV, Descendants of Mexican War Veterans, and I'm in that too, and I got into that through him. So this was my great-great-grandfather. The Mexican-American War was 1846 to 1848. So this was my mom's mom, and then her dad, and then his father. So this is my great-grandfather, or great-great-grandfather, I'm sorry. Richard Henry Sharp served his country in the U.S. Army during the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. This was, I don't have any pictures of him. I wish I did. But he died in, oh, I don't have a date of death on here. Well, maybe I do. That's not real clear. I want to say maybe like the mid 1860s, because pictures as we know them really kind of started around the Civil War, but there's something called daguerreotypes, and those came out in 1840s. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of him, but I had the tombstone, and this looks like, obviously, the raised tombstones, I'm sure, are a lot more money. So somehow or other the family was able to raise enough money to just identify him as such. So I am grateful to have this. And you see on here, photo courtesy of Albert Ladeau. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He's actually a religious. I believe he's a priest, and he's actually put together a lot of different people in that area. So I'm really fortunate to have this, because I don't think I've been to this gravesite, but I know where it is. But just real quick here, and then I'll be finished up, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. But I had a great aunt, and it was my grandma's sister, and she was really into the family history, and she's really kind of the one that kind of started me on all this. I was really close to her. I really loved her a lot. But anyway, many years ago, and this is like a little short story, circa 1980s, because she passed away early 1990s. My great aunt Z related to me, she had found her grandfather's name. So Richard Henry Sharp, the tombstone shown here, he's my great great grandfather. But for my great aunt, this was her grandpa. But she was a teacher. And I also kind of had a connection with her through that, because I think that kind of piqued my interest in teaching as well. But she had told me many years ago she had found her grandfather's name, the Richard Henry Sharp you see here. She found his name in a school textbook, and she said he had actually carried the American flag into Mexico City during the Mexican-American War. I think it's a great story. Unfortunately, I've never been able to find it, because I know she had a daughter. She had, they had 4 daughters. One died really young, or it would be my great aunt Z had 4 daughters. One died real young, but the other 3, after she had died, the one did a lot of the kind of carried on with the family history. And she kind of carried on this story as well, but we've never been able to find the book that kind of substantiated that. So it's a great story. I hope at some point I can find that. Not for lack of looking. So again, whenever I do go to retire, I have just from the kind of like the brief overview I gave you tonight, I do have some more information I need to get on some of these. So, and like I said, I have a lot more that I've put together. When I put together this book for my daughter, it's close to 100 pages. And what I gave you here was probably about half. These are the ones that I have. These are the ones that are probably a little more closely related. But I do have other close relatives in here. I have, like, first cousins once removed on both my parents' side. So I do have a number of other individuals that I've highlighted. But the ones that are on here, basically, I just kind of went over what I had written on them from a couple of years ago and just tried to give you some really basic, general information. And that's, pretty much, a little bit of an overview on both sides of the family that have, served their country in the military in one form or another. So just very proud of all of them.